We've got is public comments. We do have one request to make public comments from Merle.
Yep.
Would you like to go ahead?
Sure. No, I already got my list. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Merle Braylon. I live in Pine Forest, Unit 6. Number one on the YMCA proposal, I think it's an absolutely great idea. I think it's something the community very much needs. I do have some concerns, however. I was wondering if there's any connection with YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club, if that's going to be included in there. Also, I did kind of question as to how the medical facility would fit into the whole thing. I assume that it's to produce jobs, but it seems like a strange combination. And that's why I question that. And furthermore, we have some other needs in the community as well. What I'm concerned with is the need for a fire station on the northwest side of town. And there's been significant growth there, but there just hasn't been a whole lot of way of fire support. Of course, we're very much cognizant of all the fire issues that we've had. So that's an issue that I question, or would suggest that we look at some point in time. The other thing would be it was mentioned that it would be a medical facility and that Seton would be involved. Is there a letter of intent or some kind of an agreement in place with Seton?
No, at this time.
Have you had a conversation with them in that regard?
Can we reply to this?
No, we cannot.
We can't.
Okay.
Yeah, it's public comments, and we cannot answer questions during
Okay.
public comments.
Okay, anyway, those are just some of my concerns, and but I think that, again, the backing of the YMCA is an excellent idea. We need that for our community. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other, we don't have any other forms that were submitted, so I'm assuming there's no other public comments. So moving on, action items, consideration, discussion, and possible action on request that EDC participate in funding the development of a YMCA facility as a BEDC project under statutory authority related to promoting the establishment and expansion of medical facilities for the community of Bastrop. So I suppose, Gary, at this point, I think, why don't you get a...
All right, I'll address this. Give a little bit of history. You know, at the last meeting we discussed BEDC participating to fund the Y based on a breakdown that I had put together of the city putting in $1.8 million, the BEDC putting in $700,000, the grant money, the HUD grant putting in $1.6 million, and the YMCA putting in the balance, which would be at least $2.5 million, which would be a matching with the amount that the city and BEDC would put in. Subsequent to that, or during that meeting, the mayor was concerned about getting adequate public notice out there to get some feedback back on what the community thought about us participating with the YMCA to build this facility. And subsequently we had a city council meeting, and at that city council meeting the council approved in concept spending $1.8 million, and we had a list of other terms that we thought were key bullet points for this to work. One of them was the Boys and Girls Club, that there would be provisions to accommodate some Boys and Girls Club activities at the YMCA or the Y. And so upon that approval, the city manager was instructed to negotiate a contract along the lines of the key terms that the council approved and put forth, but then also work out all the little minutia details that you just have to have in a contract, including clawback provisions, etc. That agreement that the council had in it that the BEDC, or I guess some other funding, would have to still take place for this to work, because the project comes up $700,000 short, And so I'm presenting back today that I would like to see the BEDC fund that $700,000. The YMCA has offered a 0% loan on that to the BEDC, and I think the BEDC should support this project. I think that the public comments, we've had some today, we've had some at the last meeting, but our approval of this funding today is not the end of the discussion. For this to be approved, the funding would still have to be approved by the city council as a BEDC project. The council itself would have to approve the final contract, and I think at the next city council meeting or a subsequent city council meeting, when the contract comes back to the council, there will be adequate opportunity to flesh this out before the public with plenty of advance notice. So I don't think that our moving today to approve this would be unnecessarily brief. I think that we still have time for any of the public to chime in on this issue. And that's where I see it from my standpoint.
Let me add to that. One of the things, what I asked or what we passed at the last meeting was that we would join together with the city council and have a joint hearing or something where everybody could come together and voice their opinions about either BEDC money or city council money. City council did not pass a motion to agree with that. I don't know if it was an oversight or whatever, but we didn't do that. So I think that we did ask Mike to go, the city council did ask Mike to go try to work a deal out. We had a bunch of deal points. One of the deal points is, as you said, Gary, the $700,000 from somewhere else. And if that, so that's one of the things that Mike could check off his list. If we pass that tonight under some form, then Mike can check it off his list and say, let me keep working on the other issues with the Y. Some of the communities are aware of a lot of those, and anybody that looks at the proposal that Gary and I presented to the council at the council's last meeting, it's got a bunch of deal points that have to be met. And Mike's charged with looking into those and trying to figure them out. So I think and I agree with Gary that we've got plenty of opportunity to advertise. Press is here tonight. We can write notes, put on our websites that you want to come say something about the EDC money or whatever the council may propose, and I'm going to post that for the first meeting of February. Plenty of time for people to get there to voice their opinion so the council can decide on both ends, approving anything we may do tonight and then whatever the council does. If we decide not to support this tonight, then I think the deal's gone and we can move on to something else. So it's a good, the opportunity tonight is to go ahead and make a decision. I think we were fairly inclined last meeting to do that. There's plenty of time for the citizens to weigh in whether council approves it or not. But if we do it tonight, I can check it off. If not, we can probably just stop the whole process.
And I would note that the clock is running on this project, that it's that the HUD grant needs to be completed by September of 17. That's like a year and a half from now. The project would have to be designed, it would have to be built. Not only that, there's still issues with land acquisition that needs to be worked out if the Seton land is what's going to be used for this project. That agreement has to be struck. There are a lot of loose ends. So it's really important if we can approve this tonight, that at least they're over that hurdle to move. It's sort of the critical path, just narrow that critical path down to those key issues it's going to take to get this thing built.
And I'll just add to that, that at the council meeting, the council or the city manager and the CEO of the Y both agreed that they could get a building built in the time to satisfy HUD if we started March 1st with drawing plans. So the absolute drop deadline for both groups is March 1st. And So it is urgent to that extent, so. I
Mayor,
mean,
for what it's worth, I don't know if anybody has explored this or not, but, you know, it is ultimately a federal entity that is making this grant. If we've got something that this community is onto that is going to be good and beneficial to the community, somebody, and I would assume it would be your office, should be, once this thing is gelled and we know that it's going to happen, should be contacting our congressman and see if there's any relief that can be given on the time frame over which these funds are going to be available.
I mean, that's
to-
possible, but it's just the opposite, Joe. I mean, we understand from talking to the county judge, it's come down to us from General Land Office and from HUD, at those levels, that, I mean, HUD could pull the plug on this anytime. Our deadline was December 31st. So, I mean, it may be that we could prevail on somebody to make a difference, but I think we're all operating on the basis that I think the judge feels fairly confident about the time frame that we have set, but he certainly isn't guaranteeing that. And I don't know that Congressman Farenthold or anybody else could guarantee that for us. So
I'm
we can
not
do
coming
that.
at it from that end. I'm coming at it from the other end. If we've got something that is working and we're progressing on it, then there's no need in rushing something that will give us a poorer project if we have the opportunity to explore an extension, not keeping the deadline where it is, but an extension. And so I'm just putting that on the table.
Yeah, I think that should be a parallel
Thinking
track,
about.
that we should definitely try to do that. But at the same time, let's move forward at the most expedient way possible and then explore all other avenues. But obviously, if we can extend the time a little, get more time to get all the design work done in a quality fashion, that would certainly be optimal.
I think the mayor was right on when he said that there's a timeline that we have to meet, and the timeline that we have to meet is what the judge is telling us we have to meet. But I agree with you as well, that when we get down the road, and I think we made a good faith effort to get to where we need to be, and there's something that may hold this up, I think that's when the mayor's office makes a call to both of the congressmen and see if there is some relief to extend the time on.
Yeah,
on time.
I'm not at all suggesting that anybody take the foot off of our neck
Oh,
at this
yeah.
point.
Out of curiosity, this suddenly became our emergency that we inherited from the council. How long has this grant been out there?
I don't know how long it's been out there, but I felt like with the
Well,
mayor's
no.
motion at the last meeting that we had, and then it looked like good progress was made in the council meeting, the last council meeting you guys had, that we needed to at least get together at the BEDC and at least vote on or vote on to either approve or not approve the $700,000. And that's what I felt was urgent based on my conversations with Gary. And, you know, and to the extent that BEDC doesn't want to do that, obviously we're going to get together and we're going to vote on that. So it's not.
Yeah, I-
Let me try. I think
you
you're just.
justified having a meeting, but you didn't answer, how long has this grant been out there? That's suddenly an emergency.
Well,
driving this.
we've known about it for more than a year.
Okay.
Well,
But-
thank you for saving it for beyond the deadline.
You know, you can look at this any way you want to look at it, but the process was, the why was trying to negotiate a deal with the city to get a facility that was a meaningful facility in Bastrop. And they were given like a 90-day period to try to come up with funding to be able to fund the excess of what the city could or was not offering, which was just a $1.6 million grant. And they were going to try to see if there was a way to work with that money to build something meaningful. They came back and said, we can't do it. And that's when it came back and they said, but if you can come up with these funds, then we would be able to do it. And I looked at what the city had approved, you know, what Joe's recommendation, look at what was gonna be the ongoing cost of operating Plan B, which was in excess of $60,000, plus the city was already contributing $40,000. So the city would be committed with building this Plan B, minimally $100,000 forever. The Y plan, if we do the Y plan, we would be contributing, well, besides the BEDC funds, the city would be contributing $90,000 for 20 years, and that would be it. The city would be off the hook. It wouldn't be a forever thing. So the investment from the city standpoint is you're getting a $6.6 million facility for a 20-year commitment of less money than what this other building, a $1.6 million building, would be. And that cost of that $1.6 million building would go on forever. So it's substantial savings.
I don't know if I want to answer your question first or address what your opening comments were, but you almost were implying that this meeting tonight was city council driven, and that's totally wrong. Now, what he did, in talking to somebody, he did it either as a BDC member or a single council member. The rest of the council didn't have anything to do with the meeting that we're having tonight, so I'm going to address that up front with you. And if that was your question, that's the way I'm going to address it. Now, back to your original comment about the funding. I'm in support of the $700,000, so I'm not sure why we're getting into the other cost of the other city tonight. But if you're going to throw it out, I'm going to throw out my proposal, and I think I've got a pretty good one. And I don't know if I'm going to throw it out tonight or wait till the night. But since he's talking about that, and this deals solely with the 1.8 million.
Let's just deal with BEDC.
Well, I mean, and I wish you'd have said that first because he brought that up first, Joe.
Well, yeah, but we can always
Okay,
take a
but
step back.
I just want to let the mayor know I got a different option and a different deal to how to get to the 1.8 that Gary Schiff has brought up last week, not only at the BDC meeting but the council meeting, and I think it's fair to everybody in the city.
Well, this is regarding the city.
The city money.
Well, you can talk to me as Mayor Pro Tem and me as mayor, but I think tonight it's.
Okay, well then I don't want to hear any more from him saying about where the 1.8 is coming from, because he started the conversation. I never could get in on it.
Talk to the chair.
Responding.
I don't,
But
actually,
I thought
that,
we were just here to discuss the
Yeah, and
700,000.
I should have just stopped it. I'm sorry
and
for.
that wasn't actually a
That's
question.
fine.
I agree with you.
Let's just move on.
I think we just, but I wish you would make
So
that
I
about
will make a
10 seconds
motion,
in this
I
conversation.
will make a
Hang on.
motion that we
Here.
fund, I'm gonna make a motion that we fund $700,000 for the YMCA.
Do you have a preference for how we pay it?
I propose that we fund the $700,000 on a amortized over 20 years, evenly over 20 years at 0% interest with the Y.
Second. No, I'll second it because I want to get in this conversation.
Okay, now we can have a conversation.
I think we are not approve any funding unless it's put in with your, if you would, with your motion, that we have some stipulation about who owns the property, when we get the property, when we turn over the money, when we know we have the property, the building and whatever belongs to the city, but that's maybe the city's business. But I want to make sure that if we're giving away BDC money, that we know up front about the building, about the property, and everything that goes with it. So we're not funding something or paying something to somebody, and the building's going to fall where, to the city or to the BDC or the property or the BDC or the city.
Yeah, well, yeah, the proposal was that it would be a city facility, and that, I don't know if we want to get into all the conditions. There's a whole.
Then that's a question for.
But
maybe
I think Willie's point is, does the EDC want to put some conditions on the $700,000? And if you want to do that, it doesn't make a difference what the city council's doing. This board can do whatever it wants to in terms of any kind of conditions. Am I wrong, Steve?
You're not wrong, but I think that what we really think is going to happen is, what my belief is, and I think the board's belief is that everything is going to dovetail in with both the city's funds and the EDC funds. But I think that the position of the city and the EDC is that, we're gonna have, a real stake in this land, and the land that's underlying these assets are going to be a part of the deal, whether it be a public-private partnership or whatever that entity turns out to be. The land and the structures are going to be owned by this entity. So that's my understanding, but again, I think we're all contingent, this whole thing is contingent upon us actually all agreeing to the
Yeah.
terms of all the documentation.
Gary, and this was all construction dollars, right?
This is all toward construction.
Mr. Chairman, if I could refer you all to Sean's memo of several days ago, the 6th of January, which was handed out at the last meeting that we attended. He styled this recommendation as a contingent action. And he did a pretty good job of listing contingencies on here that would have to be met before the BEDC would actually do any kind of funding. He does have a different payment schedule on here that is different from what Gary suggested, which we may want to take a second and talk about.
Yep.
And there may be another item in terms of
Correct.
the economic impact analysis that you want to talk about as well.
Yeah, when we sent this memo out at the last board meeting, we provided a recommendation, and the commitment, basically where we're at is a commitment of contingent funding based upon a set of deal points to be developed. Definitive documents be developed from those deal points. The funding, obviously, y'all are looking at a different funding model, and from staff's perspective, when we looked at it, we proposed what we thought was the most reasonable for the EDC, but there's any number of options to be considered, and the 20-year option is definitely one that's on the table. But deal point number 2 is basically they obtain commitments funding the entire project prior to execution of the contract documents. So before we enter those definitive contract documents with them, the entire project, we know that $6.6 million is available for the project. There needs to be some kind of partnership from our standpoint of a medical provider to offer expanded medical services. That creates or retains employment in the medical field and additional employment through the expanded programming of the YMCA. For us, that's as an EDC, that expanded employment is a critical component. It would be an asset of the city of Bastrop, and from our perspective, we're dollars in this, and the YMCA need to reach their agreement separate from that of the EDC, and there needs to be some kind of agreeable lease and operating agreement between the YMCA and the city on that facility, whatever it may be, a public-private partnership, a city-owned facility with a lease back to or an operating agreement back to the YMCA, however that's structured out of Mike's office through legal counsel. That during the term of the agreement, the BEDC should have no further obligations to either the YMCA or the city of Bastrop for additional funding for this project. You go to the next page and you're looking at, this is a contingent funding depending upon the development of definitive contract documents. Our process for approving contract documents is different than that of the city of Bastrop, whereas they are prepared by JC and that they're either passed by resolution or ordinance by the city council on their side. On our side, not only do we have to approve the documents, we have to hold a public hearing and have a 60-day window in which there's a process in which a petition can be held and a vote could be asked for by the citizens of Bastrop. And then we have 2 readings of a resolution at the city council level before the documents become final. And so we've got a longer window of approval for definitive contract documents coming out of the EDC than the city of Bastrop does. It's a little bit more difficult task for us to approve this type of agreement. And then we laid out at the time what we believed was kind of the timeline moving forward, and this probably each of these gets moved up by a month, where we're looking at February 28th and March 31st for the approvals necessary to make this happen. And then the other thing that we've had conversations about that probably needs to be added to this list is the BEDC conducting some type of economic impact analysis for this proposed facility to justify the $700,000. We've reached out to one economist that works in this space, and there's a couple others that we intend to, depending upon how this goes tonight, to reach out to and get some cost estimates on what that economic impact analysis would look like price-wise to get that done. There's a limited number of firms that can perform this type of analysis but I think that's a necessary addition to this, is that we have an economic impact analysis done so that the community understands what the benefits of the YMCA economically is going to be for the community. But
And that specifically would be used to test the legality of what we're doing to make sure it falls within the statute for our operation here at the
And
EDC.
that would include the seating operation too.
Correct, and that's why we need a third-party firm to perform that. We don't have, we can do it on a Type A project pretty easily with the data we collect from an individual singular company. But when you get into the medical services field and the ancillary benefits and things that go on with that, we really need an economist that kind of specializes in that field and can do that analysis. It's beyond our scope to be able to do it internally. There's a couple of firms here in Central Texas that do that. I think that we've reached out to one and we reach out to the other and get a price tag.
Thank you.
I guess I'll ask the board, or specifically Gary, since he's running interference on this project, or Sean. Nowhere have I heard anything about the discussion as far as Seaton's involvement, and that's not an issue because they're involved, because I'm sure because of the donation of the property. Nobody's mentioned any kind of number about, and we're always a stickler for this, about when you put something in and we're spending the EDC money, how many jobs we think we might create.
Well, that's part of the documentation.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, but nobody's, I don't remember last week's meeting or anybody tonight even saying anything about what the number might be.
And
Well, that's
that's
what I
got to
just
be
said.
developed, and then it's got to be analyzed by the econometric modeler to make sure that the return on investment is appropriate.
So when we approve a project in the park where we're gonna give away land and do that kind of stuff, and we have an idea of what that business might create in jobs, we're approving that funding because we think we're gonna get that job. So tonight we're going backwards, and we're gonna approve funding and not know how many jobs might be.
Contingent upon all these things, including the clawback, the data that's going to create the clawback in the contract.
Just wanna make sure it's all up front before.
So the contingency is that from an economic development corporation standpoint, that it works and that it's legal and that we're getting what we're paying for. And we don't know that until the definitive agreements get further along, but that's going to be part of the process.
I need to ask, can you say one more time about the 60 days that you mentioned?
When we approve what is generally perceived as a Chapter 504 Type A economic development project, there's very specific motion language that we provide to the board and how that is read off, and so it doesn't require the 60 days in the public hearing. When we go into Chapter 505, which is a Type B economic development corporation, which we have all the authority of 504 as a B, when we get into 505 and these projects are not Type A, once we approve the project, there's actually a 60-day window before we can fund it, and a requirement that we have a public hearing and provide notice to the public. And there's very specific language that we have to place in the advertiser to hold that public hearing. And we can hold that public hearing generally anytime after the contract is approved, but normally we wait till toward the middle to the end of that 60-day window. But we can't fund a project until that 60-day window closes, which really isn't an issue for this because our first funding on this is 2 years away. When we talk about if we go with an initial payment of $200,000, which is what I proposed, that would be a certificate of occupancy sometime after October 1st of 2017. And so this doesn't even hit our budget until that 18-19 budget year at the earliest. And so we're looking.
What's the purpose of the 60 days?
It allows the public to go out and get 10% of the registered voters to force a ballot initiative. And it's built into Chapter 505 of the local government code. And for any non-Type A project that we're funding, it is a requirement.
So let me make sure I understand this. City Council has agreed that we will make an absolute decision before March 1st. Let me put it the way I understand it is, somebody's going to start drawing architectural plans on March 1st. It's either going to be the Y or it's going to be the City of Bastrop for Plan B. And we can't get this done if we don't do it. We've agreed to that, based on the city manager's analysis. So we run the risk if we do, if we're presenting, if we pass this and we have this 60-day deal, then we're passing something that would have to run the risk of the citizens turning it down after our deadline for starting to draw the plans, or the WISE deadline for drawing the plans. How do we work around that? Well, maybe that's not a question for you. Let me ask you the board. How could we possibly work around that?
I'm gonna pass it on to JC and get some input there.
There's not a workaround on that.
No.
That is just a statutory requirement that exists on all 505 projects, and it always has. And that's why we do our public hearings on our projects that are under 505.
So tell me about 60 days. What does that amount to, depending on what the best scenario you can think of in terms of making it work, Sean?
When I visited with Mike on Friday, generally the process before this meeting was called, if this project moved forward, is that we'd enter into some kind of memorandum of understanding or letter of intent with the YMCA of contingent funding. And until the city, because one of our requirements here within these deal points is they work the deal out with the city of Bastrop. Once the city of Bastrop and their deal is finalized at the council level, then we develop our definitive contract documents based on that. It is a risk that the Y runs is that an election could be called. I don't know of one in recent history. It's a very high standard to reach to get 10% of the registered voters into order an election. But that doesn't mean that there's not somebody in this room or somebody in the public that's not motivated to go out and do that.
Well, it's not only a risk for the Y. We would be putting the city, because of the law, we'd be putting the city at risk of not being able to get the project done in the time frame that we've been given. If it goes past, I mean, I'm asking you, can you tell me a date with the 60-day? What's your best scenario for working this 60-day thing out?
Well, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
You can speak to that, but as quickly as the board decides to do the funding, it can post a public hearing and have it immediately. The public hearing can flow immediately. It's taking the public's pulse on the intention to commit the funds for expenditure.
3 days from tonight plus 60 days.
Third week in March.
Okay, when is that?
About March 23rd, 4th, 5th.
Well,
somewhere in there.
depending on the advertiser schedule. I mean, we're speaking.
If we can get it in the advertiser.
Sure,
So
sure. But I
what's
mean-
your date?
Third week in March.
So,
I was expecting Mike to be here tonight.
Let me ask you this
Speak to
way,
this.
see if I'm understanding what you're saying. If in what you just said, the 20-something, and you keep bringing up the March 1st deadline.
I'm not bringing it up, I'm
I mean,
referring
no,
to
no,
what we
and you're
agreed.
correct in it, because that's what the city manager said at the meeting. And you're right, one day, on March 1st, somebody, either the city or the Y, is gonna start on a plan, architectural plans for a building, because that's what was said in the meeting.
What we agreed to.
That's what, exactly right. So now we're talking about 60 days from now, and regardless if it's next week, 60 days starts, or this, end of this week, how do we do that if those people that you're talking about have an opportunity to get 10% of the votes and they use that full 60 days, we're running the risk going past March 1st.
And then we have to have an election on top of the 60 days?
No, only if they gather 10% of the.
if
If
they
they
gather
gather-
10%, then it goes to the public for an
And
election.
then how long would it take to have an election?
Forever.
The March 1st deadline, I think, is based on a schedule that somebody came up with about how long it would take to design and build the entire facility. And they backed into starting the architectural drawings on March 1st. Well, as Christie knows, starting architectural drawings doesn't mean that you got a bunch of draftsmen that are drawing on day one. They are negotiating a contract, they're scoping the project out, they're doing all the stuff they gotta do before they know what they're gonna build. A lot of that's been done by the Y already based on their renderings that they've done. So I don't know how critical 1 March is, but the Y has perhaps done a lot more work than the city has on what their facility is going to look like.
Well, you might influence the city council, but all I'm saying is, Mike has been in conversation with the county judge. He's already asked for an extension, which we've received. The county judge has said the county doesn't want to do anything but help the city of Bastrop do what's best for us. But he can't guarantee what HUD's going to say about deadlines or what GLO is going to say about deadlines. But we have committed that we would build a building, and right now we're committed 100% to build a building of our own for $1.6 million over at Bob Bryant Park. It's not what we're talking about here. It's not what I think is first choice. It's not what the council has asked for first choice. But it is doable so that we don't lose the $1.6 million. That's what the council's been saying. So I'm concerned at this point about what bind we're going to put the council in based on the information we have. And I don't know. All I know is we agreed to that at the last meeting. So I'm hoping that we will, whatever we do tonight, if we do something positive about this, that we bear in mind that this is going to come into conflict with what the council has agreed to. And we just need to, I want to make sure we're upfront and honest about that.
So let me ask Jesse, if the deal comes back at the end of March and they have 10% of those registered voters, that's not enough time to have it in tune with the city election in May, is it? Or we're looking at November then?
I don't think we could do it in May. We'd have to call for it, I suppose, in November. Maybe there's an option for a special election, but the truth of the matter is, it wouldn't fit in with the timeline that we're talking about. So that $700,000 might be, but it's the BEDC's money that would be an issue then.
I think,
We'd be missing the March 1 deadline by about 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, 2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks, which might not be a critical, as Joe's saying, they backed into that date, I believe, through calculations of engineering and construction.
I don't want to be presumptuous, but I believe that the risk for a recall election, if that's what you want to call it, a referendum on this issue is fairly minute. And I would think that the why, if we gave approval tonight to fund $700,000, assuming that it met all the legal requirements, including the 60-day period, that the Y would be willing to move forward with planning that facility. And of course, the council would have to agree that it's okay. I mean, if you really think there's a risk involved, you could actually start a parallel track of designing building A and designing building B at the same time for 30 days. And if the thing falls apart, you've spent 3 weeks, whatever it is, 30 days or less worth of design time on Plan B if Plan A goes, or vice versa. If you absolutely want to guarantee the process is going to work, you could go both ways designing, and your outlay would be still fairly minimal to start the design process for 3 weeks.
The design cost to the city on a $1.6 million building is not
small.
going to be very much money. The
much
design
would that
cost
be?
on a YMCA facility is going to be a $6 million project. Complex building is going to be costly.
But that would, that's as long as know what we're talking about, and since we know about this 60-day deal, and that we inform the city council, then, you've got you as a city council member have an option to propose what you just proposed. Sounds pretty creative to me, So, but at least that's
Yeah, so
at least they know what they're up against.
And I don't think that decision has to be made in this room today.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying we be
No.
honest about it and make sure we know what we're doing
Right,
to
we
the council.
we
when do it.
identify it, we go forward, we approve the funding to the extent that it is indeed proves out to be legal and, meets all the guidelines. We approve it today. We throw it back at the city council for further approval of all the other conditions. And the decision to be made by council, whether they would like to take the risk of moving forward with just Plan A or if they want to do Plan A and Plan B for 3 weeks.
But I agree with you. I think we need to move forward. I don't think in the community, personally, my thinking is you're gonna see anything to what we're talking about as far as BEDC money. I don't see it where it possibly could come back as your recommendation on how the city spends the 1.8. But that's a separate total issue from what we're talking about tonight. But I don't believe this is gonna come up in the community about spending $700,000.
So I would like to amend my motion,
I withdraw my second.
okay? I'm amending, I'm putting forth in a new motion here that we agree to fund $700,000. I would say even the terms of how we're gonna fund that to be determined, but that we would fund the 700,000 with the bullet points laid out on this memo of,
Plus the addition of the modeling, comment the modeling.
yeah, I haven't gotten there yet, the condition of
Excuse me.
January 6th memo, and that, that it follow that the monies will not be expended unless they meet all the EDC guidelines.
And
legally.
those are specified under,
Are they in here?
this last 6 bullet points under recommendations, plus
Yeah.
something else?
Does it include your funding mechanism that you mentioned?
Gotta
earlier in the
go
meeting?
back.
No, I don't want to put the funding in. We'll talk about the funding at the next meeting. I think right now we just need to approve that we're willing to fund, unless you want, do we want to talk about how we're going to fund it at this
I don't
meeting?
think you need to do it this meeting.
Well, here's what I think. Have we talked to the Y about their willingness to make the same deal that they offer to the city, about paying it back over 20 years?
We have not had that specific conversation.
I think
with
you ought to
them.
put it in there, because if that to me is a deal breaker. I'd like to know that the Y is willing to do that with the BEDC as well.
Has the Y addressed how the EDC funding would work? I'm asking that to Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew Wiggins, District Exec, YMCA. We would prefer what is written in Sean's memo in terms of getting a little bit more upfront to allow us to build the building. If it is BEDC's recommendation to spread it out over 20 years, that is not a deal breaker for us.
So I'll stand on my motion, which is we'll figure out the financing later.
The funding.
The funding, how we're gonna, whether we're gonna spread it out, how much we're gonna spread out. And I'd like Sean to revisit his recommendation and then come back at the next meeting for a justification of how you'd like to see it funded and why.
Second.
So the decision would be made at our
I just had a second.
regular February meeting about how we structure the funding?
Yeah, we would need to move forward under this model with the public hearing at the February meeting, so that we can get the clock ticking on the 60 days. But then we could also have that memorandum of understanding with the deal structure in there at the February meeting.
Would the legal stuff be affected by how we fund it?
Would legal? No.
But I would like to see, and it's not part of the motion, but as if we're talking about little technicalities here, I'd like to see us have a public hearing as soon as legally possible. Let's start that clock as fast as we can go. So if the council should decide it wants to do A and B, that the commitment for funding of the design of the $1.6 million building will not be that great, I guess, for funding both projects, actually.
You gotta say that again for me to catch up.
Okay.
Why don't we finish?
The motion is the motion. It doesn't really, this is not part of the motion.
I'm talking about this motion.
Okay.
Because you need me to make an amendment, I'll make an amendment. I want to find out, but I'd rather talk about the the inexact proposal that Gary has about how we fund it. So I'm asking about what's not in this. Or, no, I'm taking it.
I would say, worst case, we would fund it this way. Best case, we'd spread the money out over a longer period of time.
When do we make the decision about whether we can spread it out or not? That's my question.
As to the 1.6 plus the.
No.
No.
Just
The
700,000. Here's my question. When do I get to to weigh in on the fact that I believe it's really important that we spread it out over 20 years.
Well, I think the Y just said to us, they would rather have it that way, but they're willing to go the 20 years.
I'm working on the motion.
All right, I will amend my motion.
I withdraw my second.
I will make a new motion that all of the things that I mentioned in the last motion, with the addition that funding would be in amortized equal payments over 20 years, $700,000, no interest.
From the
That's
line.
the motion.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Just in principle of the matter, do we really want to throw that on this board for 20 years when we're long gone?
I'll answer that question because it was my idea. Yes, we do. Because we don't want, if we take a bunch of money and pay it up front, we're tying up money that we may absolutely need for stuff that's already on the table, that we've been talking about here, that we need to be available, we need to have available to spend on some deals if they come through. If Sean's group can work them, we need to have that money. For us to put $35,000 a year out of the $60,000 this year that we've got for available money, and the next year 35,000 is a whole lot less, and the next year it's a whole lot less, and the next year we won't even be thinking about it because we'll have so much income coming in. I just think that it's a no-brainer for us to do this, to maintain our budget surplus and to put an item in our budget for 20 years that's going to be decreasingly important or significant is the word, significant. And I just think it didn't make any sense to me that we would tie up a whole bunch of money up front when we may need it for projects that are crucial to having a bunch of money to throw into it.
I think the mayor's correct.
Well, I'll agree with that. Just when we went through our budget last year, we didn't have, I mean, we're paying the city a lot. This is another.
It is, I don't think this is the city, this is a Y project that Sean has laid out why it's important to our economic interest. And whether or not the city is involved in it or not, it is a project that goes to quality of life, it goes to getting people to move here and build houses and buy stuff at Walmart. And I think, if I'm following you correct, I'm not the expert you are, but I think that's what you're telling us.
You know, I know we have the votes for this to pass, but as a citizen, I have questions for the council, kind of how it came up and was it vetted and all these questions which have nothing to do with being here. But sitting here tonight, I have to say I kind of felt like I was at a council meeting. I mean, there's only two of us that are not on the council or haven't been on the council. So
Well,
you put us in sort of an odd, we're a funding mechanism for a council project in some ways.
Well, without the council, it's not going to work. Without the EDC, it's not going to work. I see it's a partnership.
I'd like to call the question,
Go ahead.
which means we'd call for a vote.
We do not have a second on the current motion on the floor.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, Willie seconded.
Wait a second.
I thought you withdrew your second.
He
Till I wait till he
reseconded.
made a motion.
And then
So you're moving that we stop talking.
Yes, and we vote.
I'll second that because I don't think anybody else wants to vote.
It's already been
Wants to talk.
seconded.
No, you got to second his motion for us to shut up talking.
He just called for a vote.
He didn't. Did you make a motion?
I called the question.
And that means you're moving. that
I
we-
am moving that we cease discussion and vote.
And I'm seconding.
All in favor?
Aye. Now we need to vote on the motion.
Call for a vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Any opposed?
No,
So you're voting no, or you're voting
Abstention?
as opposed?
You're not voting, not voting, or are you doing?
Voting no, you voting?
well, I'm still pondering, to tell you the truth.
You want some candy? You want some
I
candy
know
while
it-
you're thinking?
I know it's a done deal.
Can y'all
It's
ponder
just-
after I leave, because I'm gonna make a motion to
Follow
adjourn.
Has some
bliss, follow
reservations.
your passion. Tell us what you want to do.
It's already passed.
We hadn't
How
heard
do we
your vote.
register your vote?
We still have to record your vote, or that you're not voting.
No, I'll vote for it.
Okay.
Your motion.
To adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.